Hello everybody and welcome to Monster Mondays. Today we're going to talk about...
Okay, it's a good boss. Yes. It's a good day.
Hello everybody and welcome to Monster Monday. Today we're going to be talking about the Kobold. Kobold's origin begins sort of... There's a bunch of different versions and it's sort of vague a little bit on it, but my favorite one is the one for the ancient Greek, which is the Kobolds. And there's three different creatures that were sort of grouped together to be part of the Kobolds after the fact. They originally had three different names. There were the Kobolds, which were tiny, gnomish mischief makers that looked like penises for some reason. Greek. Alright. There were the Kaikairos, I think. I have no idea how to pronounce it, but it's something along those lines. And they were small, impish creatures, and they were ugly and warty and hunched. They looked like tiny old men, but they had massive penises for some reason, like comically large penises. I don't know what the obsession is there, but it's Greek, so whatever. Just moving on. There were also the Kirkopes, which were just puckish rogues who like to play pranks on people. And there is a version for each of these creatures of a certain myth for Heracles or Hercules, wherein one of these creatures would steal his weaponry and try to get away, and in each version, Hercules hunts them down and captures them and is about to kill them when he decides not to for differing reasons. For the Kirkopes, he's carrying them off to kill them, and they start laughing, and he asks why are they laughing when they're about to be killed, and they point at his backside and go, "Your butt is showing, and it's more tan than the rest of you, and that's hilarious." And he's like, "Oh yeah, that is pretty funny. So I guess I'll let you go for some reason." I don't know. I don't know if it's the Kobolds or the Kakeros that the same thing happens, but instead he decides to keep them and train them as pets, and then gives them to a princess in a faraway land to be jesters. At least I hope that's what it's for. The legend just says that he gives the Kobolds or the Kakeros, I can't remember which, to the princess for entertainment. Considering their description, I hope it's as jesters, but it could be something else. It's Greek. I don't want to touch it. I really don't want to touch it. But they all ended up being called Kobolds because they're so similar to each other, just these small, ugly creatures that are phallic in some way, that are puckish rogues and steal things, and people would call mischievous children Kobolds, that they're invoking the spirit of Kobolds. That creature, the mythology around that creature began to spread, and in different places they began to be called different things. In France and Normandy, they are known as goblins or gobelins. They're called boggarts and pucks in England, and in Germany they actually kept kobold. They started calling them kobolds, but then they came up with their own three different versions of kobolds. In German folklore, there's the household kobolds, which are sort of mischievous but also helpful sprites. They sort of remind me of a different mythical creature that I cannot remember the name of right now. But they sort of help out around the house if you treat them nicely, but if you ignore them or you don't thank them for their work, they'll start breaking things and causing all sorts of mischief around the house. Then there's the underground kobolds, which are sort of like dwarves. they're just small old men who work in mines, and they can either be helpful to the miners or they can be hurtful to the miners. And sort of the like the poisonous gases and all the mishaps that can happen in a mine were sort of blamed on them. Like if you didn't treat the kobolds well, then they would cause sickness and death among miners. And they would also like steal some of the more valuable minerals as sort of their services for helping the miners out when they were doing good. Then there were sea kobolds, which actually were sprites for like long voyages. They would help out somehow. It doesn't go into specifics, but they were very like helpful to sailors, and they would like give good fortune, and they were just straight up good. They didn't blame sea kobolds for anything bad that happened at sea. So sea kobolds were good. The others were, they could be good, they could be evil, they were also fairly mischievous. Like I said, over time, they sort of became known for differing things, and it's actually kind of funny. In mythology, kobolds and goblins are not friends. They hate each other's guts. They're either bitter rivals, begrudging allies, or mortal enemies. So I think it's kind of funny that they sort of share the same origin, and that they were sort of known as the same thing for a little while in some places. There's even a version of kobold as being an earth spirit in the Jewish Bible, but I don't know too much about that, so I'm not gonna touch on that too much. But yeah, so that's where kobold came from as far as folklore and mythology goes. But they're mostly known nowadays for their video game and their RPG versions. In basic Dungeons and Dragons, they were dog-like creatures that were even weaker than goblins, but more plentiful than goblins. They were known to be the fastest repopulating, fastest growing, as far as population. There were more of them than any other humanoid. They birthed eggs for some reason, and they were plentiful. But they were just like small dog-like weak creatures back then. Over time in Dungeons and Dragons, they were more and more touched upon, and in newer versions of Dungeons and Dragons, they're actually more lizard-like. I mean, they still have canine features, but they're scaled, and they just have like little bits of hair coming out here and there. And some of them say they're lizards, some of them say that they're draconic in origin, saying that they were originally created to be servants of dragons. And fun fact, the kobolds of that sort of strain are responsible for the written version of the draconic language. Dragons have no need for writing out their language, but their servants, like kobolds, did, and they speak in a strange sort of version of draconic.
They speak very quickly, and they speak in a different language, so it's very hard to understand what it is that they're actually saying, because they speak in this hipping language.
So they created the written form, which spread to elves, their other servants, to humans as well, who like to practice magic. They like to play around with draconic language. So that's where the written form came from, which I find kind of interesting. In Dungeons and Dragons, kobolds are lawful evil or lawful. They're more likely to be good than they are to be non-lawful. They have a close-knit sort of tribe mentality where the oldest of them and the most powerful as far as magic is concerned, they're the leaders. And while they don't have familial ties, they do have clan ties. So while a tribe may be several clans, each clan is responsible for a specific purpose within the tribe. Like, one clan will be in charge of mining, one clan will be in charge of guarding, one clan will be the noble class, one clan will be the lawmakers, and they sort of, they interact in that way. So, that's how they sort of, they exist as a sort of a government. Some versions of them have them living above ground, but most of them have them living underground. Now, there are other versions of kobolds. For instance, in World of Warcraft, they're actually more like mole rats. And they have a candle in their head that they desperately want to keep. They like to go into other people's minds and try to take it over, and they steal the valuable minerals from the mine. Now, I have a funny theory for those versions of kobolds, for World of Warcraft kobolds. It seems to me that they are afraid of fire and also afraid of the dark, which is why they're so desperate to keep their candle, but they also want to keep it on their heads. They don't like having lanterns or other sorts of lighting unless it's not fire-based. There are different ways of projecting light that don't have to do with fire, and they'll keep those kinds of lanterns, but they won't keep normal like fire lanterns. Or if they do, they'll have it be a candle. They won't have it be like an oil lamp or anything like that. I think the reason why is that they find some comfort in the candle and the tiny flame, because they're afraid of fire. And even then, some of them are so afraid of fire that they keep the candles on their heads rather than holding a lantern. They're also afraid of the dark, so it's like, how we either have to have the fire or we have to have something else, or we have to work in the dark. So it's like, why not have the best of both worlds, keep the candle on their heads? I have another theory, which is a little bit more sinister, wherein they're looking for something, because they don't dig their own mines, but they go into other people's mines, they ransack it, and they leave. And we don't see what they do with any of the minerals that they gather. They could just keep it like crows, and then they just like make a hoard of raw material that they just play around with. But I think it's more likely that they're looking for something and they just haven't found it yet. But they don't know they don't even know what they're looking for, so they don't know where to dig. So they just let other people dig, and they go into the mines. It's like, okay, it's not here. Whatever it is we're looking for, we don't know, but we definitely know that it's not here. So let's just go to the next one. Those are my two theories as far as that goes. So that was the Kobold. I hope that you found some of that fun, some of that enlightening, and I find it so funny that the lizard, lawful evil like creature that's a bitter rival of goblins. They're not only from the same mythology, but originally kobolds were just these tiny old men like dwarves, but they had like comically large penises. I find that so weird that that's a thing in normal folklore. That would be a thing. Whereas, like, us nerds, we're like, maybe not dwarves with big dicks. How about lizard creatures instead? Just go in a completely other tangent with that. So, I hope you found that as funny as I did. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, everybody.